Title: The Mirror That Never Forgets. I never believed in ghosts. I believed in bad wiring, old plumbing, creaky floors, and the human brain's talent for turning shadows into monsters. I believed in the way grief could sharpen a person's imagination until it started cutting shapes out of ordinary darkness. I believed in the comfort of explanations, in the idea that every sound had a source and every fear could be traced back to something simple. I didn't believe in curses. I didn't believe in spirits trapped in walls. I didn't believe a house could want anything, not until the house on Hawthorne Road. I didn't come looking for it. I didn't chase legends or hauntings, and I didn't have the kind of life where people collected ghost stories like souvenirs. I was in town for a short contract, boring work, strict deadlines, nothing romantic. The company paid for travel, not comfort. A hotel would have eaten my per diem alive. An entire house listed online for less than a single room back home looked like a win. The listing itself was strange. 3 photos, all wide shots, no close-ups, no bathroom, no kitchen details, no landlord, just a line under the price. Quiet historic home, available immediately, no parties. In daylight, the place looked like any old American home that had outlived its era. Exhausted white paint, a porch that sagged in the middle like it had learned to bow, shutters that didn't quite sit straight, pine trees pressed close to the road, their needles whispering whenever the wind moved through them. The town around it was small and tired, too. A 2-lane main street, a diner with a flickering sign that promised coffee like it was making an oath, a gas station that sold bait in the back corner, and a library that looked like it hadn't changed since the 70s. When I met the realtor, the first hint of something wrong finally surfaced. Her name was Elaine. She wore a cardigan even though the afternoon was warm. Her hair was neatly pinned back as if she had prepared for a funeral, not a showing. She didn't climb the porch steps with me. "The keys are in the lockbox," she said, pointing with one careful finger. Her voice was gentle, but she spoke like she was trying not to disturb the air. "You'll be alone here. It's private." "Private is good," I said, trying to lighten the mood. "I'm not here to host anyone." Elaine nodded too quickly. She glanced down the street and then back at my face, and her eyes lingered as if she was memorizing details. "If you need anything," she said, "call my office, not my cell." "Okay," I replied. "Why not your—" But she was already turning away. She walked to her car without looking back and drove off, leaving me on the porch with my suitcase and the uneasy feeling that I'd been handed something fragile. I told myself she was just a nervous person. People in small towns had their habits. Maybe she'd had a bad experience with tenants. Maybe she didn't like strangers. I opened the door and stepped inside. The smell hit me first. Old wood and dust, layered with something sharp beneath it. Metal warmed by sunlight, rust maybe, like an old toolbox left open in the rain. It wasn't overpowering, but it stuck to the back of my throat. The air inside was cooler than it should have been. Not cold, but held. As if the house kept its own temperature on purpose. And then I saw the mirrors. There was one in the entryway, tall and oval, framed in dark wood carved with shallow patterns worn smooth by time. Another hung at the far end of the living room, reflecting the hallway like a tunnel. In the dining room, 2 mirrors faced each other, creating an endless corridor of repeating rooms that made my eyes ache if I stared too long. Even the kitchen had a narrow strip of mirror running along one wall, just wide enough to catch you as you moved. It didn't feel decorative. It felt like the house was watching itself. I set my suitcase down and walked through the rooms. The furniture was sparse, staged, but not inviting. A couch that looked like it had never known a body long enough to leave a dent. A coffee table without scratches. A dining set that didn't match the era of the house. No photos, no books, no art, nothing personal. The place wasn't lived in. It was waiting. Upstairs was worse. At the top of the stairs, a mirror faced you so you could watch yourself arrive. In the bedroom, a full-length mirror was positioned directly across from the bed. The closet doors were mirrored too, turning the room into a box of reflections. I considered covering them. I even reached for the bedspread, thinking I could drape it over the largest one. Then I noticed the glass wasn't modern. It was slightly wavy, like old windows in buildings that had survived too long. When I moved, my reflection moved with me, but not perfectly. The edges of my body lagged behind by the smallest fraction of a second, like a memory trying to catch up with the present. I stood there and waved my hand. My reflection waved back, a heartbeat late. "It's just old glass," I said out loud, as if the house needed reassurance. That evening, I ate takeout at the kitchen counter, trying not to look at myself in the mirror strip. When I did glance up, my hands looked unfamiliar, like someone else was feeding an imitation of me. I showered quickly. The bathroom mirror had faint gray lines across it, the kind you get from harsh cleaner or age. I wiped them with a towel, but the lines didn't move. They looked etched into the surface. I went to bed early because the house felt expectant, like a held breath, and I wanted to be asleep before it decided to exhale. The darkness in that bedroom wasn't complete. The mirrors caught what little light there was, the streetlight outside, the pale line of the window, and the shape of the bed, and stretched it thin. I lay there listening to the house settle. A pipe clicked. Wind pressed softly against the siding. A car passed somewhere far away. Sleep came in fragments. I woke with the sensation of being watched. It wasn't a thought. It was physical, like pressure against my skin. My eyes opened and I stared straight ahead. The mirror facing the bed reflected the dim glow from the streetlight. In the reflection, I was sitting up. In reality, I was still lying down. For a long second, my brain refused to accept it. It tried to explain it away. Maybe I was half dreaming. Maybe my eyes were adjusting. Maybe I had shifted without realizing. Then the reflection turned its head slightly, as if listening to something behind it. I blinked hard. The reflection lay back down. My heart began to race, late. All like it had been waiting for confirmation. I rolled onto my side, facing the wall, and forced my eyes shut. I didn't sleep again until exhaustion dragged me under. Morning came like a pardon. Sunlight filled the room. Normal sounds returned, a dog barking, a distant truck downshifting, the thin chirp of birds in the pines. My fear from the night before felt foolish in daylight. I made coffee and laughed at myself. New place, old house, active imagination. As I stirred sugar into my mug, I caught my reflection in the kitchen mirror strip. It was watching me with an intensity I wasn't wearing. I stared at it. It stared back. Then it smiled. Slow, careful, not my smile. My hand stopped moving. The spoon clinked once against the mug. I turned fully toward the mirror. My reflection's face was neutral again. I stood there until my coffee went cold, trying to decide what was worse, that I had seen it, or that I could already feel my mind reaching for excuses. I went to work and stayed busy. I told myself the glass was warped. I told myself lighting played tricks. I told myself stress did strange things. That night, the knocking began. It wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It sounded like fingernails tapping glass from the other side. Soft, curious, patient. At first I thought it was a branch brushing a window, but the sound came from inside, not outside. It started in the living room, a gentle tap, tap, tap against the mirror at the end of the hall. I walked toward it. The tapping stopped. I stood in front of the mirror and stared at myself. Nothing. I turned away. Tap, tap, tap. The sound followed me. When I moved into the kitchen, it shifted to the mirror strip. When I went upstairs, it came from the mirror at the top of the stairs, always behind glass, always just out of reach. I tried to ignore it, but it burrowed into my nerves. I put on headphones. The tapping found gaps between songs. I turned on the television. The tapping landed between commercials. At midnight, I snapped. I grabbed a kitchen towel and draped it over the mirror strip, covering my reflection. The tapping stopped instantly. Relief washed through me so fast it felt like weakness. Then the towel began to move, not sliding down, not falling. It lifted, slowly, as if a hand behind the glass was raising it to peek. I stepped back so quickly I hit the counter. The towel hovered for a moment, suspended in a way that made no sense. Then it dropped, neatly, as if someone had placed it there with care. I didn't touch it again. I slept with the lights on. The next day, I went to the library. I didn't tell myself I was investigating a haunting. I told myself I was being practical. If the house had old wiring, maybe it had electrical issues causing lights to flicker and reflections to distort. If there were known problems with the property, maybe the town had records. The library smelled like paper and lemon cleaner. An older woman behind the desk watched me with polite suspicion. When I asked about Hawthorne Road, her expression changed. Just a fraction, but enough. "You're staying there," she said. "I am," I admitted. She didn't ask why. Instead, she stood and walked to a back room, returning with a folder that looked like it hadn't been opened in years. She set it on the desk with a soft thud and slid it toward me. Inside were newspaper clippings and typed reports. The name that repeated across them was the same: Margaret Hale. She had lived in that house nearly a century ago. According to the clippings, she had been known as polite, quiet, devoted to her family. Then something happened. The articles never agreed on what. Some said illness, some said an accident, some said a fire that didn't spread but left smoke damage in only one room. What they did agree on was that Margaret lost her children. One by one. After the last funeral, she stopped leaving the house. She covered the windows. She ordered mirrors from catalogs and hauled them inside herself. She placed them at angles that made no sense to anyone else. Neighbors reported seeing candlelight moving through the rooms at night, not like someone walking, but like something searching. Then the reports became stranger. People claimed they saw children in the upstairs windows weeks after the funerals. Children who stood still, faces pale, eyes dark, watching the street. The town sent a priest. The priest left before he finished the blessing. Margaret died in the house. Some said of grief, some said of starvation. Some said she refused to eat because she believed her children were feeding her through the mirrors. After her death, the town tried to clear the house. That's when the first man broke his arm. He hadn't fallen. Witnesses said he had been yanked backward by nothing. The second man ran out screaming that his reflection was following him. The third refused to enter again. The folder ended with a single typed note, unsigned. The mirrors were not removed. Do not sleep facing them. I closed the folder with hands that felt slightly numb. The librarian watched me the entire time. "You should leave," she said, not unkindly. "I can't," I replied. "Not yet." She leaned closer, lowering her voice as if the books might listen. "Then don't look too long," she said, "and don't answer if it calls." I almost laughed. Almost. "What calls?" I asked. But she had already turned away, returning to her desk with the deliberate calm of someone who had decided she could not save me. That night, I came back to the house with my shoulders tight and my thoughts louder than usual. I tried to move through the rooms like nothing was wrong. I tried to treat the mirrors like furniture. But I could feel them. Not watching. Exactly. Waiting. I cooked a simple dinner and ate it standing up. I avoided the dining room where the mirrors faced each other, creating that endless tunnel. I kept my eyes down. I went upstairs and brushed my teeth without looking directly into the bathroom mirror. When I entered the bedroom, I stopped. The full-length mirror across from the bed was uncovered. I hadn't covered it, but that wasn't the problem. The problem was that something had been written on the glass, not with marker, not with paint. The letters looked like they had appeared from inside, as if fog had formed the words and then set into the surface. "Welcome back." My skin prickled. I stared at the words until my eyes watered. Then my reflection raised a hand. I did not. It lifted its fingers and pressed its palm to the glass, as if trying to touch me through it. I stumbled backward and hit the bed. My reflection's face remained calm, patient. Then it opened its mouth. No sound came from it, but the knocking began again. Tap, 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 faster now. Eager. I ran downstairs. In the living room mirror, I caught a glimpse of myself moving behind me in the reflection, like a second person matched my steps half a beat late. In the kitchen strip mirror, my reflection turned its head to follow me even when I didn't look. I grabbed my keys and made it to the front door. The doorknob wouldn't turn. I yanked harder. Nothing. The deadbolt was unlocked. The chain wasn't on. The knob simply refused. as if the door had become part of the wall. The tapping moved closer. It came from the entryway mirror now, the tall oval one. Tap, tap, tap. I spun toward it. My reflection in that mirror wasn't me. It wore my face, yes, but the expression was wrong. The eyes were too still, too certain. The mouth held that careful smile, like someone learning how to look human. The reflection raised a finger and pointed behind me. I didn't want to turn. I did anyway. The hallway was empty. When I looked back at the mirror, the reflection's smile widened, and the door behind me clicked. Not unlocking, locking. The sound was quiet, polite, final. I backed away from the mirror until my shoulders hit the wall. My mind raced, grabbing at solutions like a drowning person grabbing at air. Leave through a window, call someone, break the glass, break the glass. The thought landed with a cold clarity. I ran to the kitchen drawer and pulled out a heavy metal can opener, the closest thing to a weapon I could find quickly. I returned to the entryway mirror and raised it like a hammer. My reflection didn't flinch. It leaned closer to the glass, face inches from mine. I brought the can opener down. The metal hit the mirror with a sharp crack. Pain shot through my arm. The mirror didn't break. Instead, a thin fracture line appeared, then stopped, as if it had decided not to continue. In the fracture line, something moved. Not a reflection. A shadow sliding along the crack like a finger tracing it from the inside. I dropped the can opener. The tapping stopped. A voice spoke. It wasn't loud. It wasn't inside my head. It came from everywhere the mirrors could see. "You're tired," the voice said softly. I froze. It sounded like me, not a recording. Not an imitation, like my own voice pulled out of me and handed back. "You're scared," it continued. "You're alone." I pressed my back harder against the wall, as if I could merge into it. "What do you want?" I managed. The mirrors held their silence for a beat. Then the voice answered. "To remember you," it said. I swallowed. "That doesn't make sense." "It does," the voice replied. "You already live in us." My eyes flicked involuntarily to the kitchen mirror strip. In it, my reflection was standing in the entryway, but its head was turned toward the hallway, listening. My stomach twisted. "You're not real," I said, more to myself than to the house. The voice sighed, a soft sound that seemed to fog the glass. "Margaret said that too," it whispered. I didn't know how it knew that name. Then I remembered. It had been here. It had watched her. It had learned her grief. My phone was in my pocket. My hands shook as I pulled it out and tried to call Elaine. No signal. Of course. I tried the office number. No signal, no service. The screen reflected my face back at me, small and pale. In that tiny reflection, my eyes looked wrong, too still, too certain. I shoved the phone away. The voice spoke again, closer now, like it was standing behind my shoulder. "You saw yourself," it said. "You felt it. That's how it begins." I forced myself to breathe slowly. Panic would only make me stupid. "Let me out," I said. The mirrors seemed to hum, a low vibration, like wires vibrating under tension. "What will you give?" the voice asked. I stared at the entryway mirror, at the calm face that wore my features. I won't give you anything," I said. The reflection's smile faded. For the first time, I saw something else behind it. Something older, darker, shaped like a person but stretched, as if it had been pressed flat against glass for too long. The house made a sound like a slow inhale, the mirrors darkened, and the lights went out. I stood in darkness so complete it felt thick. The air smelled sharper now, more metallic, the kind of smell you notice in hospitals, in old basements, in places where something has been sealed away. Then the mirrors began to glow, not bright, not warm, a pale gray illumination like moonlight trapped under glass. Shapes moved inside, not reflections, scenes. I saw a woman in a long dress standing in the dining room. Her hair was loose, her face gaunt. She held a candle and stared into the mirror tunnel, eyes wide and dry. Margaret. I saw her press her hands to the glass, mouth moving as if speaking to someone on the other side. A child appeared behind her in the reflection, small, still. Margaret's face softened, then shattered into grief so intense it made my chest ache. She reached for the child. The child didn't move. Then the reflection of the child smiled. Not a child's smile. The same careful smile I'd seen on my own face. Margaret's candle trembled. The scene shifted. Now Margaret was upstairs, in the bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed facing the mirror. Her shoulders were hunched, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. She was talking. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the desperate rhythm of them, like prayers. Then her reflection sat up. Margaret didn't. Her face went slack with terror. The reflection leaned forward. The scene went dark. I stumbled backward, breathing hard. The mirrors weren't showing me visions for entertainment. They were showing me a history, proof, a warning, or a promise. The voice returned, softer, almost tender. She wanted them back, it said. In the darkness, the words felt like fingers brushing my skin. She gave us her nights, the voice continued. Her days, her hunger, her hope. She watched until she forgot how to look away. I stared at the glowing mirrors, at the dim scenes still moving behind them. What happened to her? I asked. The voice paused, then quietly, she stayed. My mouth went dry. The mirrors flickered and showed another scene. Margaret in the entryway standing before the tall oval mirror. Her face was streaked with tears. She looked older than she should have, worn down into something fragile. She reached for the door. It didn't open. She turned back to the mirror. In the glass, her reflection held out a hand. Margaret took it. The moment her fingers touched the glass, the reflection pulled. Margaret's body moved like it had been yanked by a rope. Her shape stretched, her mouth opening in a silent scream. Then she was gone. The mirror returned to reflecting an empty hallway. My stomach lurched. I pressed a hand to my mouth, trying not to vomit. The voice spoke, satisfied. "She's here," it said, "in the place that remembers." I looked at the mirrors again, at the faint glow, at the endless corridors. In the dining room mirror tunnel, I thought I saw a figure standing far down the repeating line. A woman. Still. Watching. I backed away until my heels hit something solid. The couch. I could feel the house around me, not like walls and floors, but like attention, like an animal listening. I forced myself to think. If the mirrors were the house's mouth, then breaking them might be the only way to silence it. But the entryway mirror hadn't broken when I struck it. It had cracked only as much as it wanted. Maybe it wasn't ordinary glass. Maybe it needed something else. Heat. I remembered the kitchen, the stove. I moved cautiously, eyes scanning each mirror as I went. In the kitchen strip mirror, my reflection walked with me, but again, half a beat late. It watched me the way a predator watches prey. I turned my face away from it and focused on the stove. I flicked the burners on. The blue flames sprang up, bright and real. The house seemed to flinch. The mirrors dimmed slightly. Good. I grabbed a metal baking tray from a cabinet and held it in the flame until it grew hot enough to sting my fingers through the cloth I used as a mitt. The voice hissed softly, like displeasure. "Don't," it said. I didn't answer. I carried the heated tray into the entryway and pressed it against the mirror's surface. The glass didn't shatter, but it screamed. Not a sound in the air, but a vibration through the metal, through my arms, into my teeth. The mirror's surface fogged instantly, and beneath the fog, shapes writhed. The fracture lines spread, thin veins of crackling light. I pressed harder. The voice rose, no longer calm. "Stop," it demanded. The mirror's fog thickened, and my reflection appeared behind it, face contorted with something like anger. It pressed both palms to the glass from the inside. I pressed the tray harder. The reflection's palms burned. I could see the skin blistering, though it wasn't real skin. The reflection opened its mouth and screamed without sound. The mirror cracked wider. A cold gust burst out of it, smelling like damp earth and metal and old flowers. My vision blurred, eyes watering. I stepped back. The mirror's surface bulged outward. Something behind it pushed. A hand emerged. Not a human hand. Long fingers. Too many joints. Nails like dark glass. It reached for the air, feeling. I stumbled backward. The house creaked. A deep groan like an animal in pain. The lights flickered on and off. The mirror hand flexed. And then, in the corner of the mirror, I saw a face. Margaret, or what was left of her. She was flattened behind the glass like a pressed flower, her eyes wide and pleading. Her mouth moved. Help. I couldn't hear it, but I could read it. Help. The inhuman hand shifted, as if noticing her too. It shoved her aside. Margaret's face slid out of view, disappearing into the gray depths. My throat tightened. I had thought the ghost would be Margaret, but Margaret wasn't the monster. She was the evidence. The mirrors weren't haunted by her. They were feeding on her, and on anyone else who stared long enough. I backed toward the kitchen, mind racing. The stove was still on. Fire. If heat hurt it, then more heat might kill it. I ran to the pantry and grabbed a bottle of cooking oil. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped it. I splashed oil onto the rug in front of the entryway mirror, then onto the baseboards, and then onto the towel I'd used as a mitt. The voice erupted, furious now. "You can't," it said. "You can't leave. You already gave us your eyes." I grabbed a lighter from a drawer. I didn't remember owning one, but it was there, as if the house had placed it for me. I stared at it for a second, suspicion flaring. Then I heard the mirror hand scraping against the glass, widening the crack. I didn't have time for doubt. I flicked the lighter. A small flame appeared. The mirrors brightened as if leaning in. I dropped the flame onto the oil-soaked towel. Fire raced across it with a hungry whoosh. Heat rose instantly, fierce and real. The mirror screamed again, vibration shaking the entryway. The inhuman hand jerked back. The crack widened, spidering across the surface. The glass finally shattered, not into normal shards, into pieces that looked like dark ice. A wind burst out of the broken mirror, cold enough to sting my skin. The fire flared, then wavered, fighting the sudden gust. In the swirling air, I heard voices. Not one. Many. Whispers layered over each other, overlapping, pleading, chanting. And beneath them, a deeper sound, like something growling in a language older than words. The house shook. Upstairs, something crashed. Down the hallway, a mirror shattered on its own. Glass fell like rain. The mirror tunnel in the dining room flickered, the repeating rooms collapsing into darkness. I coughed, eyes watering from smoke and cold. The voice roared now, no longer pretending to be mine. It sounded like metal scraping stone. It sounded like a mouthful of nails. "You can't burn a memory," it snarled. The broken mirror pieces on the floor began to move. They slid toward each other like magnets, trying to reform. I grabbed the heated baking tray again and slammed it down onto the pieces, crushing them. The fragments shattered into smaller shards. The air screamed. The house groaned. A shadow poured from the mirror like smoke, twisting into a shape that almost resembled a person. It leaned toward me. In its center, where a face should have been, I saw my own features, stretched and wrong. My smile, my eyes, my mouth opening as if to speak. I turned and ran. The front door was still locked, but the air around it felt different now, less solid. The house's grip had weakened. I threw my shoulder into the door. It didn't move. I tried again. Behind me, the shadow hissed. The cold air thickened, trying to push the fire out. I grabbed the doorknob and yanked with both hands. This time it turned. The door flew open. Night air rushed in, smelling like pine and freedom. I stumbled out onto the porch, coughing, eyes stinging. Inside the house, the mirrors were still breaking. The sounds were sharp and frantic, like the house was tearing out its own eyes. I ran down the steps and into the yard. Behind me, the porch light flickered once, twice, then died. The windows glowed with that same pale gray light from the mirrors. In the upstairs window, I saw someone, a woman, Margaret. Her face pressed against the glass, eyes wide. Her mouth moved. Help. Then the shadow slid over her like a curtain. She vanished. The window went dark. I kept running. I didn't stop until the town's diner came into view, its flickering sign buzzing like an insect. I burst through the door, breathless, sweaty, shaking. The waitress looked up, startled. Everyone in the diner turned to stare. For a moment, the room was silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights. Then someone whispered, "Hawthorne." A man at the counter stood slowly, eyes narrowed. "What did you do?" he asked. "I tried to leave," I said. My voice came out hoarse. "The house. There are mirrors. Something is in there." The waitress's face drained of color. She looked past me to the windows, as if expecting the house to appear at the edge of the street. The man at the counter swore under his breath. "You shouldn't have stayed," he said. "I didn't know," I snapped. Anger flared, sharp enough to cut through fear. "Why would you let someone rent it out? Why would anyone—" "Because it keeps the town safe," the librarian said. Now I turned. She stood near the doorway, coat thrown over her shoulders, hair still pinned back. She must have followed me from the library earlier, or maybe she had simply been waiting. "What does that mean?" I demanded. She looked at me with tired sadness. "It likes to look," she said. "It likes to collect. For a long time, it stayed in that house and didn't wander. The mirrors kept it focused, contained." I stared at her, trying to process the words. "And Margaret?" I asked. The librarian's lips pressed together. "She fed it," she said quietly. "Not on purpose. She thought she was keeping her children close. But the thing behind the glass isn't a spirit. It's an emptiness. It learns faces, it learns voices, it learns what you want to see." I thought of my reflection smiling when I wasn't. Yeah, I thought of the voice using my own tone. I felt my stomach twist. "It tried to keep me," I said. The librarian nodded. "It will try again," she said. "It doesn't forget. Not once it's seen you." A cold shiver ran down my spine. "What do I do?" I asked. The librarian glanced toward the window. Outside, the road was empty, dark, lined with pine trees. "You don't go back," she said. "You leave town, tonight, and you don't look into mirrors for a while." I almost laughed. It would have been hysterical. "That's impossible," I said. "There are mirrors everywhere." "Then you learn to look past them," she replied. I should have left right then. I didn't. I made a mistake that still wakes me up some nights. I went back. Not because I wanted to, not because I was brave, because my laptop was still in that house, my work files, my wallet, my medication, and because part of me, the stubborn, rational part, wanted proof that I wasn't losing my mind. I waited until dawn. The librarian begged me not to. The man at the counter offered to go with me. I refused both. I told myself I would be quick, in and out, grab my things, leave. The road to Hawthorne was quiet in the early morning. Mist hung between the pine trunks. The house appeared through it like a pale shape rising from water. The front door was open. I stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. Smoke stains marked the entryway. The smell of burned oil lingered, sharp and bitter. Through the open door, I could see the shattered mirror pieces scattered across the floor like dark glitter. I took one step onto the porch. The house made no sound. I took another. Still nothing. Maybe, I thought, it's over. Maybe fire had done what fear couldn't. I crossed the threshold. The air inside was colder than before, not cooled by night air, colder in a way that felt deliberate. I walked through the entryway carefully. The tall oval mirror was gone. Only the frame remained, charred and empty. The other mirrors were cracked, their surfaces webbed with fractures. As I passed the living room mirror, I saw movement. Not behind me. Inside the glass. A shadow sliding along the cracks like ink. I kept my eyes forward and moved quickly to the kitchen. My laptop sat on the counter, exactly where I'd left it. My wallet was beside it. Too neat, too easy. I reached for the laptop. A voice whispered from the kitchen mirror strip. "Stay." It sounded like me. My hand froze. The mirror strip fogged slightly. And my reflection appeared, clearer than it should have been in morning light. It smiled, then it raised a finger to its lips. Quiet. Behind the reflection, I saw something else. A woman. Margaret. Her face was pressed close to the glass. Her eyes were pleading. Her mouth formed one word: run. My heart slammed against my ribs. I grabbed the laptop and wallet and turned. The hallway mirror showed me leaving, but the reflection didn't move. It remained standing in the kitchen, still smiling, as if it didn't need to chase, as if it knew I couldn't outrun it. I sprinted for the front door. The door swung shut, not slammed, closed gently, politely, like a host finishing a conversation. The lock clicked. I stopped short, breath ragged. The mirrors began to hum, a low vibration, rising in pitch. The cracked surfaces brightened with pale gray light. The fractures glowed like veins. The house was waking up. I lunged for the door and yanked. It didn't move. Behind me, the voice spoke again. "Don't be afraid," it said, soothing now. "You'll be safe here. You'll be remembered." I turned. In the living room mirror, my reflection was walking toward me, not in the room, in the glass. But each step it took made the mirror's surface bulge outward, as if the reflection was pushing through. I backed away, chest tight, eyes darting. Every mirror in the house showed the same thing now, my reflection moving independently, approaching. In the dining room mirror tunnel, there were dozens of me, marching forward in endless repetition. The glass began to ripple. My reflection's hand pressed out from the living room mirror, stretching the surface. It wasn't a reflection anymore. It was an invitation, a trap. I remembered the librarian's words. It learns what you want to see. It learns faces. It learns voices. I forced myself to stop looking. I squeezed my eyes shut and listened instead. Where were the windows? How far to the kitchen? Could I break through glass that wasn't a mirror? I took a step, then another, moving by memory. A whisper slid into my ear. "You're doing it wrong." My own voice. I ignored it. I reached the kitchen. My fingers found the counter edge. I opened my eyes just enough to see the back door. It was there. An ordinary door. No mirror. I ran for it. The moment my hand touched the knob, the voice screamed. The mirrors screamed with it. The house shook. A force hit me from behind. I'd like invisible hands slamming into my spine. I flew forward and crashed into the door. Pain exploded across my shoulder. I fell to the floor. The back door swung open from the impact. Cold morning air rushed in. I crawled, ignoring pain, dragging myself toward the open doorway. Behind me, the mirrors hummed louder. The air thickened. A shadow poured across the floor like spilled ink. It reached for my ankles. Its touch was cold enough to burn. I kicked, screamed, scrambled. My fingers caught the threshold. I pulled. The shadow tightened around my leg, pulling me backward. And then a hand grabbed my wrist. Not the shadow's. A human hand. Strong. Warm. Someone yanked me forward, hard. I tumbled out onto the back steps, gasping. The man from the diner stood above me, breathing hard. "I told you," he said through clenched teeth. Behind him, the librarian stood with a small canister in her hand. She sprayed something into the open back doorway. The air hissed. The shadow recoiled. A sharp chemical smell filled my nose. The mirrors inside the house flickered. The humming stuttered. The librarian stepped closer to the doorway and shouted into the darkness. "Not this one," she said. The voice answered from inside, furious. "It's mine." The librarian's eyes were hard now. "It's seen," she replied. "That's all you get." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something small and dark, a shard of mirror. She held it up, and in the shard's surface I saw my reflection, wide-eyed, terrified. The librarian closed her fist around the shard. The shard cracked. A high, thin wail filled the air, unlike glass being pulled apart. Inside the house, the mirrors went dark. The shadow retreated. The back door swung shut on its own, and the lock clicked. The man helped me to my feet. "Move," he said. "Now." We ran. We didn't stop until we were back on the main road, the house hidden behind trees and mist. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my wallet. The librarian walked beside me, her face pale but controlled. "You shouldn't have gone back," she said. "I needed my things," I whispered. "You needed to live," she corrected. We returned to town and didn't speak much. The diner felt too bright, too normal. The smell of coffee turned my stomach. The man paid for my breakfast without asking. The librarian sat across from me, hands wrapped around a mug she didn't drink. After a long silence, she said, "It will look for you in reflections." "What do you mean?" I asked. She glanced at the spoon on the table, at the faint distorted shine in its curve. "It doesn't need the house forever," she said, "but the house is where it learned, where it grew." My skin crawled. "How do I stop it?" I asked. The librarian's mouth tightened. "You don't," she said. "You deny it. You starve it." "By not looking?" "By not feeding it attention," she replied. "By not talking to it. By not answering when it uses your voice." I thought of the way it had sounded like me, soothing and gentle. I felt sick. The man from the diner leaned forward. "Leave town," he said. "Today." I nodded. I did leave. I finished my contract remotely. I told my company there had been an emergency. They didn't ask questions. Most people don't want details. I drove out of town with my hands tight on the steering wheel and my eyes fixed on the road ahead. For miles, pine trees lined the highway like silent witnesses. Every time I passed a car, I avoided looking in the side mirror. Every time I stopped for gas, I kept my eyes down. I thought if I could make it far enough away, the house would lose my scent. I thought distance might break whatever line had been drawn between me and that place. I was wrong. It started small. A bathroom mirror in a motel that seemed to hold my face a little too long, as if it didn't want to let go. A dark screen on my phone reflecting my eyes when I wasn't looking at it. A storefront window that caught me mid-step and made my reflection pause while I kept walking. I told myself it was paranoia, trauma, exhaustion. Then, one night, I woke in my apartment back home and saw myself sitting up in the mirror across the room. I wasn't. The reflection turned its head slightly, listening, and I understood. The house had not been a place. It had been a mouth, a lens, a way for something hungry to learn how to be me. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I did the only thing the librarian had told me to do. I looked away. I rolled over and faced the wall. I forced myself to breathe slowly. Behind me, I heard the faintest sound, like fingernails tapping glass. Patient, curious, waiting. In the morning, I covered every mirror in the apartment. I live like that now. Not always, not forever, but long enough to remind myself that looking is a kind of permission. Sometimes, when I'm careless, I catch a glimpse of myself in a dark window or a shiny surface. And for a split second, my reflection smiles. Slow, careful, not my smile. And in that moment, I remember the house on Hawthorne Road, the mirrors, the way the glass felt like a living thing, the voice wearing my sound, the promise it made. You'll be remembered. If you ever find a house with too many mirrors, leave. If you ever see your reflection move when you don't, look away. Because once something behind the glass has learned your face, it doesn't need the house anymore, and it never forgets.
Thank you for watching.